Now today's topic is the post-World War and India. What happened after the World War II? What are the conditions that were at present of the India as soon as India became independent? What were the tough challenges for the new independent nations? What are the solutions for this? What did India do to overcome all these kind of things? But before going into analyzing India's role after India achieved its independence and the post scenario of the world, let us discuss what was the loss or what happened after World War II. In actual numbers, we have seen experience most of the European countries have faced huge losses in their incomes, economies, or in their properties, in their soldiers, all in everything in aspect. Everybody's life has been touched with the effect of World War II. As the calculations move on, see here, aftermath of the World War II, most of the European countries like USSR, Poland and Yugoslavia lost 20% of their entire assets in almost all the fields of economical, political and in the agricultural sector, industrial sector, military bases, military strength, everything. And moving on to especially a case study against USSR, it revealed that in USSR only we found that 1700 towns were destroyed completely. No person was left unturned and almost all were died in 1700 towns. The entire buildings were collapsed. Everything was completely destroyed in 1700 towns of USSR, and nearly 31,000 factories were demolished or stopped working after the World War II came to an end because of the economic losses or because of the lack of the labor or because of the lack of the financial resources for the industries. All these things led 31,000 factories to shut down, which means like most of the people got unemployed because of the shutdown of the factories. And moving on to the villages, nearly 70,000 villages got destroyed in the World War II, either because of the attacks made by the US or because of the Japanese attacks or because of the Hitler's attacks or because of the Italy people coming and attacking them. In all this scenario, the USSR was the main loser in the issue of terms of towns, factories or villages, leaving apart the soldiers, leaving apart the economy, leaving apart the war expenses, whatever has been made. Now moving on to the towns, only 1700 towns means it's not an easy thing. And moving on to factories, 31,000 factories, it is a very difficult task to establish all the factories again, and 70,000 villages could not be done so easily. And in contrary to this, moving on to USA, the USA was a safe zone where the war was not fought on its soil. So the loss or the impact of the World War II on it was very less. Only just 5% of the loss has been incurred. And after the Great Economic Depression, America for the first time during the Second World War got experienced hike in agriculture as well as in their industrial outputs. In agriculture, it started to give the fresh outputs of the crop, and they started to get the huge amount for their support prices for the products what they are producing there. And as the entire world was in war, they need the food, material and everything. It was supplied by USA. They achieved a greater market at that moment of time. And also for the industries, as in most of the European countries, the industries were not functioning properly. USA could utilize this time approximately and timely needs, and it could emerge as a very established strong economy. And in fact, in March 1945, the president of USA at that moment of time, Mr. Harry Truman, also clearly told that because of the Second World War, we emerged into a very strong nation. Ever since in the history happened in such kind of things. So we have to consider here, European countries lost very much because of the Second World War, but when it compared to the USA, USA was a main gainer. Yes, USA also had participated in the Second World War. You also stood against the Hitler, Japan and as well as the Italy dictatorship and all the monarchy system, and they were against the ideals of fascism and Nazism. But the impact of World War II on the economies or on the sustainability or on the towns, factories or the industries was merely very less, except of the Pearl Harbor attack on US land. Remaining any other regions we don't find as it was attacked. This made USA to turn into a very large superpower nation. Yes, in the other side, USSR suffered a very huge amount of loss in terms of towns, factories as well as in their villages also. Now let us see what are the major other developments which have come up because of the Second World War. There are three major developments which have turned the entire world into their attention. Let us see what are these very soon. Now we are going to discuss the most crucial development after the World War II, that is the establishment of United Nations, famously known as UN, United Nations, UN. The United Nations flag will be having a world map supported by the olive branches with a blue color shade, and this was started on 24th of October 1945. The main issue or the main guiding principle of UN formation was the lasting peace and the human development. Earlier, the world people have seen two devastating wars. In order to that in future no war should be escalated and no further prevention of the wars or prevention of the conflicts, we should have an organization to preserve the peace in the world and at the same time to bring a sustainable human development with which the wars could be subsided and development could take over the entire human life settings. So initially when the UN Charter was signed at San Francisco, we have 54 member nations, and today as per the statistics available of 2014, we have 193 countries as the member nations of UNO. What is the main purpose that the UNO has been done? The main purpose has already been discussed, that is the lasting peace and the human development. What are the other works that UNO is going to do? The other works what UNO is going to do is that maintain peace in the entire scenario. Wherever there is any trouble for peace, the UNO would be ready to offer her office and try to solve the issue peacefully. And the security to all the nations, security in order to the poor nations or the weaker nations where they were interested or may get an aggression from a very strong nation. At that time UN will stand in supporting to the poor nation or the weak nation or the developing nation, whichever needs the support at that moment of time. And in order to maintain the health of all the individuals, it has various other organizations. We shall discuss about the organizations. And then we have anti-poverty programs given against to eradicate the poverty in the developing countries, especially in the countries of Asia and Africa, which are once upon a time the colonial countries, which need to be eradicated the poverty at any cost of time in order to bring development and create awareness for the people about their importance of the life. So UNO has working hard in order to build all these things. Let us see the organizational setup of UNO. We have 6 main organizations of UNO or wings of UNO, popularly known as General Assembly. The General Assembly acts as the World Parliament. All the member nations will have their representations in the General Assembly, and it gathers for every year in the month of December. And we consider this as a World Parliament because almost all the nations have their representation in the General Assembly. And moving on to the Security Council. Security Council is also known as the mind of the region or the master of the community of the entire General Assembly, because in this Security Council we have a total of 15 members, out of which 10 are non-permanent members and 5 are the permanent members. The Security Council is the key members or the key status like a super cabinet which takes the decisions of the UN in final and it will be executed by the UN. The Security Council is having 15 members, in which 5 members are the permanent countries like USA, UK, USSR, Britain and France, or UK is also known as Britain, so we can consider China here. So we have 2 communist countries and 3 democratic countries as the key members or the veto power nations, because the veto power status itself, it means that there are some special importance for the countries to say on it. If UNO passes any decision, that decision can be revoked, stopped or again reinitiated using the veto power of a particular nation. This power is entrusted for the 5 permanent country nations, and 10 are the non-permanent members, which will be changing for every 2 years. They are elected by the General Assembly members in the term of their assembly sessions conducted every year. And moving on to the other organizations, these other organizations are working for the development of security, health and anti-poverty programs. UNESCO stands for United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organizations. In this sphere, the entire education, UNO tries to provide education for the poor people, scientific and the cultural advancements wherever it is not reaching in the African nations or in the Asian nations. UNO will try to provide the fund and bring the education reachable to the common man through UNESCO. And UNICEF, United Nations International Children's Emergency fund or the educational fund in order to make the children, the children are the most important part of the world right now, because they are going to be the future generations of people. So if you make the children healthy, automatically the entire world will be healthy. This is the concept of UNICEF in bringing this UNICEF of the child awareness programs. And again we have World Health Organization working out on all the health issues wherever, like smallpox, like malaria, mumps, any diseases which are eradicated by the support of the World Health Organization. In India we have the polio awareness programs like polio drops given for 0 to 5 years of age of babies, as also initiated by the WHO. In this way WHO provides support for the health issues in the entire nation. And moving on to the last part, that is FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, which provides, ensure that food is reachable to all the people, and the agricultural developments will be appropriated to the necessity required, so that the food can be produced, or the crops can be produced whichever is required for them, so the entire nation can get a sufficient amount of food. These are the various organs working for the UNO in order to maintain peace, as well as in order to eradicate poverty from the world and to maintain the world a very healthy one. But coming into reality, is this all program successful? Yes. Leaving apart the political decisions taken by UNO, because the veto power nations sometimes would be involved in the allegations which are against the weaker nations, so they are using their veto power to stop any action which is initiated by UN. But leaving apart that one, remaining all the health issues, or in order to maintain peace and security, the UNO is trying its level best, and is far extent to successful, because in one simple word we can say, as we have never seen a third world war, so we can say, conclude successfully that UNO is working very successfully, and at the same point of time UNO is having very limited say when it compares to the veto power nations to act against them. So this is one negative point which is in the existence right now. Hopefully very soon UN could come up with the existence of controlling the veto power nations also to a reasonable extent. What happened next? What are the major changes that were brought in the Cold War era? What is a Cold War era? What are the nations that are influenced by the Cold War era? We will discuss now. Moving on to the most crucial concept which was emerged after the Second World War is the emergence of two camps. That is the camp of USA and the camp of USSR. These two became the two power blocks So in order to maintain their position, and in order to maintain their status, and in order to control the other ideologies and to spread their ideologies, like USA represents the capitalism and democracy, whereas USSR represents socialism and communism. So the Cold War was initiated by these two nations, and it was on its peak for the next 46 years, that is from 1945 to 1991 is known as the era of Cold War. But in actual reality, the Cold War was never fought as a hot war on air. It was fought by taking some sides. It was fought by standing on one side versus the other side, because it is not a war which was fought directly between USA and USSR. If USA and USSR would fight directly with each other, the world would end within a second. In order to gain and in order to maintain their status, the only thing is to spread their ideology and to prove that they are superior than the others. They fought when the incidents have arisen against them. Like for example, you can see it's not a real fight, and because of the Cold War, we have the loss of 20 million citizens other than the American or the Russian civilians. These all 20 million citizens are the members of the third world countries or the other group of countries where this Cold War has been fought. We have seen these incidents occurring in the issue of Vietnam War. In the previous lesson, we have discussed the Vietnam War, where the North Vietnam and South Vietnam, the North is supported by the US, whereas the South is supported by the USSR, where it fought with each other by supplying directly arms and the ammunition, and finally it resulted in nothing, just simply in a bad name coming to US and USSR, whereas it's an evident secret to everybody that clearly this war is fueled by the two superpowers. And moving on to Korea. Korea was again divided into North Korea and South Korea. where North Korea and South Korea has again adopted towards the communalism and towards the democratic setup, where again these two were fought with each other, so getting the support of the two superpower nations. Again they fought for many years. Even today North Korea and South Korea don't have good diplomatic relations as it was in the historical past. And moving on to Angola, Angola was occupied by the French colonies and later it was given freedom after the Second World War, and again it was destroyed by the Russian attack and US people. Again it was fueling the Cold War issue here. And moving on to Afghanistan, where initially Afghanistan was supported by USSR and later of certain years they moved against the USSR because it was taken over by the Taliban, and they started to implement the Islamic State or theocratic society, where they forced everybody to follow the Islamic rules and regulations. In this way, the Cold War not only brought bad name for the two superpower nations, but also initiated and got huge loss for the common civilians who are the members of the third nations or the developing countries, where they could not fight or withstand against any decisions of the two superpower nations. In this way, it was not a easy thing to come out of this Cold War, but finally when USSR broke down in 1991 and emerged into Russia and several independent nations, the monotonous emergence of USA into superpower has made it clear, and USSR was not in the next ratio of the power blocks. So it brought end to the Cold War officially, but in the process of Cold War, we have again seen various strategies which are used by the two superpower nations. What are the two strategies that are used by the two superpower nations? We'll discuss now. Concept of Cold War, where the tactics which are used by the two superpower nations in order to control directly or indirectly from one side to the other side. What are the three major tactics which are used? There are many other tactics which are used by the superpower nations, but in actual reality we have three major tactics. One of them is the proxy war. The proxy war is a war which is initiated for countries which are fighting for an independence, would be supported and would be taken over to get against their colonial masters. It may be cited vice versa. Looking at the situation here, we have an examples to understand it very clearly. US government supported the anti-communist movements in Turkey and Greece. Actually, Turkey and Greece are following communism. So here it was supplied or supported by US for anti-communist movement. It shows that it is indirectly involving in against the communist movement. So it is a proxy war. Indirectly you initiate against the existing government to fight against them. That is called proxy war. Next situation is like Congo. Congo got independence. It's actually a Belgian colony. In 1960 it got independence, or it attained independence in 1960 after the Second World War, after a serious struggle made by the radical leader called Lumumba. This man Lumumba was a elected or emerged leader of Congo, but this man was behest killed by the Americans' most powerful agency, Central Investigation Agency, CIA agents. So it is like indirectly destroying the existing government. This is also a part of the proxy war. And moving on to the next example, in Angola, it was against the leadership which was fought. So here they could establish the support of Poland and USSR indirectly supporting here, and Cuba establishing a communist government in the Angola region. And now here we get the establishment of the leadership of the Communist Party supported by USSR, and in the same moment we have establishment of Fidel Castro taking over the leadership in Cuba, a truly communist setup against the American nations. Even America trying very sincerely to cut off them, but could not stop it, and they emerged as very strong leaders. Taking at the initiative of Fidel Castro, we have another important leader emerging in the Latin American nations, Mr. Che Guevara, but Che Guevara was killed by the American agencies. So in this way the proxy war was indirectly cutting off against the ideologies, whatever we don't believe it. And moving on to the other example is in Chile, in America, where America was scared of expansion of communism in middle and the south of China. So in Chile, the elected representatives of the Communist Party, Mr. Allende, was coopted at by the military officials who are supported by US. In this way, US has done all the ways and whims whichever is necessary for them to provoke against communism. What happened for communism? How did the communists respond for this? Why Russia could not respond so seriously as could that of USA? What are the other changes that were brought? What happened the stand of USSR in this moment? Is USSR successful at any point of time? We would check all the details now. The other side of the proxy war made by USSR. USSR was also not quite as that of USA. As USA was active, automatically it initiated USSR also to be active in the proxy war by here. See, in Germany, Hungary and Czechoslovakia, the friendly governments, the unfriendly governments of USSR were removed and the friendly governments were installed, for which they got a serious action or insatisfaction against the action of the China people, the Russian community from Germany, Hungary and the Czechoslovakian people, where they were upset with the stand of USSR. And in 1960, China started to distance itself from the stands of USSR, but finally USSR thought of controlling China, could not do anything, and it failed literally. And moving on to 1971, the Afghan issue. Afghan was fought by the two sides by support of USA and USSR were fighting indirectly on the issue of Afghan. As the Cold War went on for many years, it brought USSR decided to take away its hands and USA continued it, and when the Afghan was entering the hands of the Talibans were completely Islamic people or religious based people, they turned against USA, and in this way the Afghan issue turned bad name for or brought a bad impact for the USA. And moving on to the realities now, either it may be the USSR stand against of the existing government or the USA standing against the existing government or the existing anti-feeling of it, but in actual reality the people or the soldiers of the third world nations only have suffered a lot than the armies of USA or USSR. This was a key initiative of proxy war, which was a huge loss for the people of the developing nations of the third world countries who were recently got independence or fighting for independence. Nearly 20 million people lost their lives in this proxy war issues of the Cold War. What are the military pacts that are made? How many categories of military pacts are there? What is the main ideology in making a military pact with one group of nations with the other group of nations? Let us find out all these details now.